they've said that this is about rebalancing and aligning more with market forces, and it could be, and we'll only know based on future actions, it could be that this is about making their exports more competitive, and we know that their imports and their exports are down. But if so, you would think that they would take a bigger jump. So I think that there are all kinds of things people are saying now, and we're going to have to see what happens going forward to really figure out what their motivation is.
But is it your feeling that this sort of movement was necessary? Were there pressures in the Chinese economy that normally lead one towards a devaluation?
There were those kinds of pressures, but the overall problem with the Chinese economy is that there are distortions everywhere. They talk about letting the market work, but they don't trust the markets enough. And so that's why they get all of these kinds of little bubbles and bottlenecks and problems. And so one way of addressing the problem they have is shifting the currency valuation, but a better way is to start easing their capital controls and opening up the economy and let the market do that, which is a much better way.
A 2% devaluation is pretty immaterial in the grand scheme of currency transactions and trade. Why wasn't it more? Why are we getting so excited over 2%?
Well, that's the big question, is this about trade or not? If it is about trade, then 2% isn't that big of a deal. It doesn't shift the competitive environment. If it's about opening up their Chinese economy in some way, if it's about beginning to liberalize the cost of the value of the RMB, then 2% could actually be meaningful. We just don't know yet what the real motivations are of the Chinese leaders.
Now let's look at this from the other side of the world. Donald Trump has been commenting on it. Now, the US Republican candidate called into CNN in the United States. New Day's Chris Cuomo asked Mr. Trump if he's ever used Chinese money in any of his business projects. Have a listen.
I never use Chinese money, but I buy Chinese products because they keep lowering their currency. And today, if you look in the newspapers, the Wall Street Journal, the #1 story is that they're lowering their currency yet again, big league, because you know what? They're just destroying us. Our currency is going up, which sounds good, but actually, if you look at what it's doing to our country, and they're cutting their currency, they keep devaluing their currency until they get it right. They're doing a big cut in the yuan, and it's going to be devastating for us.
Is he right? The market is down more than 200 points. Is he right? Is it devastating to something like the US exporters?
It's not devastating, but he does have a point about the relative currency valuations, because the problem with China is that they peg their currency essentially to ours. And the dollar has strengthened so significantly over the last year or two that their currency has become very, very expensive, which especially, it doesn't affect them in relation to us, but Europe is actually their biggest market. And so they're, in a way, beginning to challenge their peg to us for their currency, because if they're expensive here and they're getting more and more expensive to Europe, that's a big problem for them.
Right, so from the US exporters, from Boeing, from GE, from all the big US exporters' point of view, they're right. He's right, Donald Trump.
Well, certainly it makes Chinese exports a little bit cheaper and imports into China, by China, a little bit more expensive. So he's right. 2% isn't huge, and that comes back to the issue of what is the real motivation here.
What do you think the real motivation is? Answer your own question.
Yes, so here's what I think. I think China benefits more from a stronger RMB than a weaker RMB, because when it's weaker, certainly it helps exports. When it's stronger, it helps their reform program. They have a big problem with capital flight, and so a weaker RMB encourages money to leave the country. They're trying to qualify for special drawing rights with the IMF. If it looks like they're managing down their currency, that's going to make that a lot more complicated. And they're trying to enhance consumption inside of China. So I think China, on the whole, China has an interest in a stronger currency. And if it was just about exports, I think we would have seen a bigger drop than what we've seen.
In a word, and I think I know the answer, this doesn't affect the Fed's decision at all.
It affects it a little bit, but the real story here, just to end, is the problem is the distortion in the Chinese economy. There's all kinds of strange things that are happening because every resource in China is misallocated, and the primary resource that's misallocated is political power. Until they address these distortions, there's going to be a lot of weirdness coming out of China.